The Blue Castle by Lucy Maud Montgomery. Narrated by Jeanette H. Kaymak. Chapters 15 through 20. Chapter 15. "Let us be calm," said Uncle Benjamin. "Let us be perfectly calm." "Calm?" Mrs. Frederick wrung her hands. "How can I be calm? How could anybody be calm under such a disgrace as this?" "Why in the world did you let her go?" asked Uncle James. "Let her? How could I stop her, James? It seems she packed the big valise and sent it away with Roaring Abel when he went home after supper, while Christine and I were out in the kitchen. Then Doss herself came down with her little satchel, dressed in her green serge suit. I felt a terrible premonition. I can't tell you how it was, but I seemed to know that Doss was going to do something dreadful." "It's a pity you couldn't have had your premonition a little sooner," said Uncle Benjamin dryly. I said, "Doss, where are you going?" And she said, "I am going to look for my blue castle." "Wouldn't you think that would convince Marsh that her mind is affected?" interjected Uncle James. And I said, "Valency, what do you mean?" And she said, "I am going to keep house for Roaring Abel and Nurse Sissy. He will pay me $30 a month." I wonder I didn't drop dead on the spot. "You shouldn't have let her go. You shouldn't have let her out of the house," said Uncle James. "You should have locked the door. Anything." "She was between me and the front door, and you can't realize how determined she was. She was like a rock. That's the strangest thing of all about her. She used to be so good and obedient, and now she's neither to hold nor bind. But I said everything I could think of to bring her to her senses. I asked her if she had no regard for her reputation. I said to her solemnly, 'Doss, when a woman's reputation is once smirched, nothing can ever make it spotless again. Your character will be gone forever if you go to Roaring Abel's to wait on a bad girl like Sis Gay.' And she said, 'I don't believe Sissy was a bad girl, but I don't care if she was.' Those were her very words. I don't care if she was." "She has lost all sense of decency," exploded Uncle Benjamin. "Sissy Gay is dying," she said, "and it's a shame and disgrace that she is dying in a Christian community with no one to do anything for her. Whatever she's been or done, she's a human being." "Well, you know, when it comes to that, I suppose she is," said Uncle James, with the air of one making a splendid concession. "I asked Doss if she had no regard for appearances. She said, 'I've been keeping up appearances all my life. Now I'm going in for realities. Appearances can go hang. Go hang.'" "An outrageous thing," said Uncle Benjamin violently. "An outrageous thing." Which relieved his feelings, but didn't help anyone else. Mrs. Frederick wept. Cousin Stickles took up the refrain between her moans of despair. "I told her, we both told her, that Roaring Abel had certainly killed his wife in one of his drunken rages and would kill her. She laughed and said, 'I'm not afraid of Roaring Abel. He won't kill me, and he's too old for me to be afraid of his gallantries.'" What did she mean? What are gallantries? Mrs. Frederick saw that she must stop crying if she wanted to regain control of the conversation. I said to her, "Valency, if you have no regard for your own reputation and your family's standing, have you none for my feelings?" She said, "None." Just like that. None. "Insane people never do have any regard for other people's feelings," said Uncle Benjamin. "That's one of the symptoms." I broke out into tears then, and she said, "Come now, Mother, be a good sport. I'm going to do an act of Christian charity, and as for the damage it will do my reputation, why, you know I haven't any matrimonial chances anyhow, so what does it matter?" And with that she turned and went out. "The last words I said to her," said Cousin Stickles pathetically, "were, 'Who will rub my back at nights now?' And she said, but no, I cannot repeat it." "Nonsense," said Uncle Benjamin. "Out with it. This is no time to be squeamish." She said, Cousin Stickles' voice was little more than a whisper. She said, "Oh, darn. To think I should have lived to hear my daughter swearing," sobbed Mrs. Frederick. It was only imitation swearing," faltered Cousin Stickles, desirous of smoothing things over now that the worst was out. But she had never told about the banister. "It will be only a step from that to real swearing," said Uncle James sternly. "The worst of this," Mrs. Frederick hunted for a dry spot on her handkerchief, "is that everyone will know now that she is deranged. We can't keep it a secret any longer. Oh, I cannot bear it." "You should have been stricter with her when she was young," said Uncle Benjamin. "I don't see how I could have been," said Mrs. Frederick, truthfully enough. "The worst feature of the case is that Snaith scoundrel is always hanging around Roaring Abel's," said Uncle James. "I shall be thankful if nothing worse comes of this mad freak than a few weeks at Roaring Abel's. Sissy Gay can't live much longer." "And she didn't even take her flannel petticoat," lamented Cousin Stickles. "I'll see Ambrose Marsh again about this," said Uncle Benjamin, meaning Valency, not the flannel petticoat. "I'll see Lawyer Ferguson," said Uncle James. "Meanwhile," added Uncle Benjamin, "let us be calm." Chapter 16. Valency had walked out to Roaring Abel's house on the Mistowies Road under a sky of purple and amber, with a queer exhilaration and expectancy in her heart. Back there, behind her, her mother and Cousin Stickles were crying, over themselves, not over her. But here the wind was in her face, soft, dew-wet, cool, blowing along the grassy roads. Oh, she loved the wind. The robins were whistling sleepily in the firs along the way, and the moist air was fragrant with the tang of balsam. Big cars went purring past in the violet dusk. The stream of summer tourists to Muskoka had already begun. But Valency did not envy any of their occupants. Muskoka cottages might be charming, but beyond, in the sunset skies, among the spires of the firs, her blue castle towered. She brushed the old years and habits and inhibitions away from her like dead leaves. She would not be littered with them. Roaring Abel's rambling, tumble-down old house was situated about 3 miles from the village, on the very edge of Upback, as the sparsely settled, hilly, wooded country around Mistowies was called vernacularly. It did not, it must be confessed, look much like a blue castle. It had once been a snug place enough in the days when Abel Gay had been young and prosperous, and the punning, arched sign over the gate, A. Gay, Carpenter, had been fine and freshly painted. Now it was a faded, dreary old place, with a leprous, patched roof and shutters hanging askew. Abel never seemed to do any carpenter jobs about his own house. It had a listless air, as if tired of life. There was a dwindling grove of ragged, crone-like old spruces behind it. The garden, which Sissy used to keep neat and pretty, had run wild. On two sides of the house were fields full of nothing but mulleins. Behind the house was a long stretch of useless barrens, full of scrub pines and spruces, with here and there a blossoming bit of wild cherry, running back to a belt of timber on the shores of Lake Mistawis, 2 miles away. A rough, rocky, boulder-strewn lane ran through it to the woods, a lane white with pestiferous, beautiful daisies. Roaring Abel met Valancy at the door. "So you've come," he said incredulously. "I never s'posed that ruck of Sterlings would let you." Valancy showed all her pointed teeth in a grin. "They couldn't stop me." "I didn't think you'd so much spunk," said Roaring Abel admiringly. "And look at the nice ankles of her," he added, as he stepped aside to let her in. If Cousin Stickles had heard this, she would have been certain that Valancy's doom, earthly and unearthly, was sealed. But Abel's superannuated gallantry did not worry Valancy. Besides, this was the first compliment she had ever received in her life, and she found herself liking it. She sometimes suspected she had nice ankles, but nobody had ever mentioned it before. In the Sterling clan, ankles were among the unmentionables. Roaring Abel took her into the kitchen, where Sissy Gay was lying on the sofa, breathing quickly, with little scarlet spots on her hollow cheeks. Valancy had not seen Cecilia Gay for years. Then she had been such a pretty creature, a slight, blossom-like girl, with soft, golden hair, clear-cut, almost waxen features, and large, beautiful blue eyes. She was shocked at the change in her. Could this be sweet Sissy? This pitiful little thing that looked like a tired, broken flower? She had wept all the beauty out of her eyes. They looked too big, enormous in her wasted face. The last time Valancy had seen Cecilia Gay, those faded, piteous eyes had been limpid, shadowy blue pools aglow with mirth. The contrast was so terrible that Valancy's own eyes filled with tears. She knelt down by Sissy and put her arms about her. "Sissy, dear, I've come to look after you. I'll stay with you till as long as you want me." "Oh." Sissy put her thin arms about Valancy's neck. "Oh, will you? It's been so lonely. I can wait on myself, but it's been so lonely. It would just be like heaven to have someone here, like you. You were always so sweet to me long ago." Valancy held Sissy close. She was suddenly happy. Here was someone who needed her, someone she could help. She was no longer a superfluity. Old things had passed away. Everything had become new. Most things are predestinated, but some are just darn sheer luck, said Roaring Abel, complacently smoking his pipe in the corner. Chapter 17. When Valancy had lived for a week at Roaring Abel's, she felt as if years had separated her from her old life and all the people she had known in it. They were beginning to seem remote, dreamlike, far away. And as the days went on, they seemed still more so, until they ceased to matter altogether. She was happy. Nobody ever bothered her with conundrums or insisted on giving her purple pills. Nobody called her Doss or worried her about catching cold. There were no quilts to piece, no abominable rubber plant to water, no ice-cold maternal tantrums to endure. She could be alone whenever she liked, go to bed when she liked, sneeze when she liked. In the long, wondrous northern twilights, when Sissy was asleep and roaring Abel away, she could sit for hours on the shaky back veranda steps, looking out over the barrens to the hills beyond, covered with their fine, purple bloom, listening to the friendly wind singing wild, sweet melodies in the little spruces, and drinking in the aroma of the sunned grasses until darkness flowed over the landscape like a cool, welcome wave. Sometimes of an afternoon, when Sissy was strong enough, the two girls went into the barrens and looked at the wood flowers. But they did not pick any. Valancy had read to Sissy the gospel thereof, according to John Foster. It is a pity to gather wood flowers. They lose half their witchery away from the green and the flicker. The way to enjoy wood flowers is to track them down to their remote haunts, gloat over them, and then leave them with backward glances, taking with us only the beguiling memory of their grace and fragrance. Valancy was in the midst of realities after a lifetime of unrealities, and busy, very busy. The house had to be cleaned. Not for nothing had Valancy been brought up in the sterling habits of neatness and cleanliness. If she found satisfaction in cleaning dirty rooms, she got her fill of it there. Roaring Abel thought she was foolish to bother doing so much more than she was asked to do, but he did not interfere with her. He was very well satisfied with his bargain. Valancy was a good cook. Abel said she got a flavor into things. The only fault he found with her was that she did not sing at her work. Folks should always sing at their work, he insisted. Sounds cheerful like. Not always, retorted Valancy. Fancy a butcher singing at his work, or an undertaker. Abel burst into his great, broad laugh. There's no getting the better of you. You've got an answer every time. I should think the Sterlings would be glad to be rid of you. They don't like being sassed back. During the day, Abel was generally away from home, if not working, then shooting or fishing with Barney Snaith. He generally came home at nights, always very late and often very drunk. The first night they heard him come howling into the yard, Sissy had told Valancy not to be afraid. Father never does anything. He just makes a noise. Valancy, lying on the sofa in Sissy's room, where she had elected to sleep, lest Sissy should need attention in the night, Sissy would never have called her, was not at all afraid, and said so. By the time Abel had got his horses put away, the roaring stage had passed, and he was in his room at the end of the hall, crying and praying. Valancy could still hear his dismal moans when she went calmly to sleep. For the most part, Abel was a good-natured creature, but occasionally he had a temper. Once Valancy asked him coolly, "What is the use of getting in a rage?" "It's such a damned relief," said Abel. They both burst out laughing together. "You're a great little sport," said Abel admiringly. "Don't mind my bad French. I don't mean a thing by it. Just habit. Say, I like a woman that ain't afraid to speak up to me. Sis there was always too meek, too meek. That's why she got adrift. I like you." "All the same," said Valancy determinedly, "there is no use in sending things to hell as you're always doing. And I'm not going to have you tracking mud all over a floor I've just scrubbed. You must use the scraper whether you consign it to perdition or not." Sissy loved the cleanness and neatness. She had kept it so, too, until her strength failed. She was very pitifully happy because she had Valancy with her. It had been so terrible, the long, lonely days and nights with no companionship save those dreadful old women who came to work. Sissy had hated and feared them. She clung to Valancy like a child. There was no doubt that Sissy was dying, yet at no time did she seem alarmingly ill. She did not even cough a great deal. Most days she was able to get up and dress, sometimes even to work about in the garden or the barrens for an hour or two. For a few weeks after Valancy's coming, she seemed so much better that Valancy began to hope she might get well. But Sissy shook her head. "No, I can't get well. My lungs are almost gone, and I don't want to. I'm so tired, Valancy. Only dying can rest me. But it's lovely to have you here. You'll never know how much it means to me. But Valancy, you work too hard. You don't need to. Father only wants his meals cooked. I don't think you are strong yourself. You turn so pale sometimes. And those drops you take. Are you well, dear?" "I'm all right," said Valancy lightly. She would not have Sissy worried. "And I'm not working hard. I'm glad to have some work to do, something that really wants to be done." "Then," Sissy slipped her hand wistfully into Valancy's, "don't let's talk any more about my being sick. Let's just forget it. Let's pretend I'm a little girl again, and you have come here to play with me. I used to wish that long ago. Wish that you could come. I knew you couldn't, of course, but how I did wish it. You always seemed so different from the other girls, so kind and sweet, and as if you had something in yourself nobody knew about, some dear, pretty secret. Had you, Valancy?" "I had my blue castle," said Valancy, laughing a little. She was pleased that Sissy had thought of her like this. She had never suspected that anybody liked or admired or wondered about her. She told Sissy all about her blue castle. She had never told anyone about it before. "Everyone has a blue castle, I think," said Sissy softly. "Only everyone has a different name for it. I had mine, once." She put her two thin little hands over her face. She did not tell Valancy, then, who had destroyed her blue castle. But Valancy knew that, whoever it was not Barney Snaith. Chapter 18. Valancy was acquainted with Barney by now. Well acquainted, it seemed, though she had spoken to him only a few times. But then she had felt just as well acquainted with him the first time they had met. She had been in the garden at twilight, hunting for a few stalks of white narcissus for Sissy's room, when she heard that terrible old gray slosson coming down through the woods from Mistawis. One could hear it miles away. Valancy did not look up as it drew near, thumping over the rocks in that crazy lane. She had never looked up, though Barney had gone racketing past every evening since she had been at Roaring Abel's. This time he did not racket past. The old gray slosson stopped with even more terrible noises than it made going. Valancy was conscious that Barney had sprung from it and was leaning over the ramshackle gate. She suddenly straightened up and looked into his face. Their eyes met. Valancy was suddenly conscious of a delicious weakness. Was one of her heart attacks coming on? But this was a new symptom. His eyes, which she had always thought brown, now seen close, were deep violet, translucent and intense. Neither of his eyebrows looked like the other. He was thin, too thin. She wished she could feed him up a bit. She wished she could sew the buttons on his coat and make him cut his hair and shave every day. There was something in his face, one hardly knew what it was. Tiredness? Sadness? Disillusionment? He had dimples in his thin cheeks when he smiled. All these thoughts flashed through Valency's mind in that one moment while his eyes looked into hers. "Good evening, Miss Sterling." Nothing could be more commonplace and conventional. Anyone might have said it. But Barney Snaith had a way of saying things that gave them poignancy. When he said good evening, you felt that it was a good evening and that it was partly his doing that it was. Also, you felt that some of the credit was yours. Valency felt all this vaguely, but she couldn't imagine why she was trembling from head to foot. It must be her heart. If only he didn't notice it. "I'm going over to the port," Barney was saying. "Can I acquire merit by getting or doing anything there for you or Sissy?" "Will you get some salt codfish for us?" said Valency. It was the only thing she could think of. Roaring Abel had expressed a desire that day for a dinner of boiled salt codfish. When her knights came riding to the Blue Castle, Valency had sent them on many a quest, but she had never asked any of them to get her salt codfish. "Certainly. You're sure there's nothing else? Lots of room in Lady Jane Grey Slauson, and she always gets back sometime, does Lady Jane." "I don't think there's anything more," said Valency. She knew he would bring oranges for Sissy anyhow. He always did. Barney did not turn away at once. He was silent for a little. Then he said, slowly and whimsically, "Miss Sterling, you're a brick. You're a whole cartload of bricks. To come here and look after Sissy, under the circumstances." "There's nothing so bricky about that," said Valency. "I'd nothing else to do, and I like it here. I don't feel as if I'd done anything specially meritorious. Mr. Gay is paying me fair wages. I never earned any money before, and I like it." It seemed so easy to talk to Barney Snaith, some way, this terrible Barney Snaith of the lurid tales and mysterious past, as easy and natural as if talking to herself. "All the money in the world couldn't buy what you're doing for Sissy Gay," said Barney. "It's splendid and fine of you, and if there's anything I can do to help you in any way, you have only to let me know. If Roaring Abel ever tries to annoy you—" "He doesn't. He's lovely to me. I like Roaring Abel," said Valency frankly. "So do I. But there's one stage of his drunkenness, perhaps you haven't encountered it yet, when he sings ribald songs." "Oh, yes. He came home last night like that. Sissy and I just went to our room and shut ourselves in where we couldn't hear him. He apologized this morning. I'm not afraid of any of Roaring Abel's stages." "Well, I'm sure he'll be decent to you, apart from his inebriated yowls," said Barney. "And I've told him he's got to stop damning things when you're around." "Why?" asked Valency slyly, with one of her odd, slanted glances and a sudden flake of pink on each cheek, born of the thought that Barney Snaith had actually done so much for her. "I often feel like damning things myself." For a moment Barney stared. Was this elfin girl the little, old maidish creature who had stood there 2 minutes ago? Surely there was magic and devilry going on in that shabby, weedy old garden. Then he laughed. "It will be a relief to have someone to do it for you, then. So you don't want anything but salt codfish?" "Not tonight. but I dare say I'll have some errands for you very often when you go to Port Lawrence. I can't trust Mr. Gay to remember to bring all the things I want." Barney had gone away then, in his Lady Jane, and Valancy stood in the garden for a long time. Since then he had called several times, walking down through the barrens, whistling. How that whistle of his echoed through the spruces on those June twilights! Valancy caught herself listening for it every evening, rebuked herself, then let herself go. Why shouldn't she listen for it? He always brought Sissy fruit and flowers. Once he brought Valancy a box of candy, the first box of candy she had ever been given. It seemed sacrilege to eat it. She found herself thinking of him in season and out of season. She wanted to know if he ever thought about her when she wasn't before his eyes, and, if so, what? She wanted to see that mysterious house of his back on the Mistawis Island. Sissy had never seen it. Sissy, though she talked freely of Barney and had known him for 5 years, really knew little more of him than Valancy herself. "But he isn't bad," said Sissy. "Nobody need ever tell me he is. He can't have done a thing to be ashamed of." "Then why does he live as he does?" asked Valancy, to hear somebody defend him. "I don't know. He's a mystery. And of course there's something behind it, but I know it isn't disgrace. Barney Snaith simply couldn't do anything disgraceful, Valancy." Valancy was not so sure. Barney must have done something, sometime. He was a man of education and intelligence. She had soon discovered that, in listening to his conversations and wrangles with Roaring Abel, who was surprisingly well read and could discuss any subject under the sun when sober. Such a man wouldn't bury himself for 5 years in Muskoka and live and look like a tramp if there were not too good, or bad, a reason for it. But it didn't matter. All that mattered was that she was sure now that he had never been Sissy Gay's lover. There was nothing like that between them. Though he was very fond of Sissy and she of him, as anyone could see. But it was a fondness that didn't worry Valancy. "You don't know what Barney has been to me these past 2 years," Sissy had said simply. "Everything would have been unbearable without him. Sissy Gay is the sweetest girl I ever knew, and there's a man somewhere I'd like to shoot if I could find him," Barney had said savagely. Barney was an interesting talker, with a knack of telling a great deal about his adventures and nothing at all about himself. There was one glorious rainy day when Barney and Abel swapped yarns all the afternoon while Valancy mended tablecloths and listened. Barney told weird tales of his adventures with shacks on trains while hoboing it across the continent. Valancy thought she ought to think his stealing rides quite dreadful, but didn't. The story of his working his way to England on a cattle ship sounded more legitimate, and his yarns of the Yukon enthralled her, especially the one of the night he was lost on the divide between Gold Run and Sulphur Valley. He had spent 2 years out there. Where in all this was there room for the penitentiary and the other things? If he were telling the truth, but Valancy knew he was. "Found no gold," he said. "Came away poorer than when I went. But such a place to live. Those silences at the back of the north wind got me. I've never belonged to myself since." Yet he was not a great talker. He told a great deal in a few well-chosen words, how well chosen Valancy did not realize. And he had a knack of saying things without opening his mouth at all. "I like a man whose eyes say more than his lips," thought Valancy. But then she liked everything about him, his tawny hair, his whimsical smiles, the little glints of fun in his eyes, his loyal affection for that unspeakable Lady Jane. His habit of sitting with his hands in his pockets, his chin sunk on his breast, looking up from under his mismated eyebrows. She liked his nice voice, which sounded as if it might become caressing or wooing with very little provocation. She was at times almost afraid to let herself think these thoughts. They were so vivid that she felt as if the others must know what she was thinking. "I've been watching a woodpecker all day," he said one evening on the shaky old back veranda. His account of the woodpecker's doings was satisfying. He had often some gay or cunning little anecdote of the woodfolk to tell them. And sometimes he and Roaring Abel smoked fiercely the whole evening and never said a word, while Sissy lay in the hammock swung between the veranda posts, and Valancy sat idly on the steps, her hands clasped over her knees, and wondered dreamily if she were really Valancy Sterling, and if it were only 3 weeks since she had left the ugly old house on Elm Street. The barrens lay before her in a white moon splendor, where dozens of little rabbits frisked. Barney, when he liked, could sit down on the edge of the barrens and lure those rabbits right to him by some mysterious sorcery he possessed. Valancy had once seen a squirrel leap from a scrub pine to his shoulder and sit there chattering to him. It reminded her of John Foster. It was one of the delights of Valancy's new life that she could read John Foster's books as often and as long as she liked. She could read them in bed if she wanted to. She read them all to Sissy, who loved them. She also tried to read them to Abel and Barney, who did not love them. Abel was bored, and Barney politely refused to listen at all. "Piffle," said Barney. Chapter 19. Of course, the Sterlings had not left the poor maniac alone all this time, or refrained from heroic efforts to rescue her perishing soul and reputation. Uncle James, whose lawyer had helped him as little as his doctor, came one day and, finding Valancy alone in the kitchen, as he supposed, gave her a terrible talking to. Told her she was breaking her mother's heart and disgracing her family. "But why?" said Valancy, not ceasing to scour her porridge pot decently. "I'm doing honest work for honest pay. What is there in that is disgraceful?" "Don't quibble, Valancy," said Uncle James solemnly. "This is no fit place for you to be, and you know it. Why, I'm told that jailbird, Snaith, is hanging around here every evening." "Not every evening," said Valancy reflectively. "No, not quite every evening." It's insufferable," said Uncle James violently. "Valancy, you must come home. We won't judge you harshly. I assure you we won't. We will overlook all this." "Thank you," said Valancy. "Have you no sense of shame?" demanded Uncle James. "Oh, yes. But the things I am ashamed of are not the things you are ashamed of." Valancy proceeded to rinse her dishcloth meticulously. Still was Uncle James patient. He gripped the sides of his chair and ground his teeth. "We know your mind isn't just right. We'll make allowances. But you must come home. You shall not stay here with that drunken, blasphemous old scoundrel." "Were you by any chance referring to me, Mr. Sterling?" demanded Roaring Abel, suddenly appearing in the doorway of the back veranda, where he had been smoking a peaceful pipe and listening to old Jim Sterling's tirade with huge enjoyment. His red beard fairly bristled with indignation, and his huge eyebrows quivered. But cowardice was not among James Sterling's shortcomings. I was, and furthermore, I want to tell you that you have acted an iniquitous part in luring this weak and unfortunate girl away from her home and friends, and I will have you punished yet for it. James Sterling got no further. Roaring Abel crossed the kitchen at a bound, caught him by his collar and his trousers, and hurled him through the doorway and over the garden paling with as little apparent effort as he might have employed in whisking a troublesome kitten out of the way. "The next time you come back here," he bellowed, "I'll throw you through the window, and all the better if the window is shut. Coming here, thinking yourself God to put the world to rights." Valancy candidly and unashamedly owned to herself that she had seen few more satisfying sights than Uncle James's coat-tails flying out into the asparagus bed. She had once been afraid of this man's judgment. Now she saw clearly that he was nothing but a rather stupid little village tin god. Roaring Abel turned with his great, broad laugh. "He'll think of that for years when he wakes up in the night. The Almighty made a mistake in making so many Sterlings, but since they are made, we've got to reckon with them. Too many to kill out. But if they come here bothering you, I'll shoo 'em off before a cat could lick its ear." The next time they sent Dr. Stalling. Surely Roaring Abel would not throw him into asparagus beds. Dr. Stalling was not so sure of this and had no great liking for the task. He did not believe Valancy Sterling was out of her mind. She had always been queer. He, Dr. Stalling, had never been able to understand her. Therefore, beyond doubt, she was queer. She was only just a little queerer than usual now. And Dr. Stalling had his own reasons for disliking Roaring Abel. When Dr. Stalling had first come to Deerwood, he had had a liking for long hikes around Mistawis and Muskoka. On one of these occasions he had got lost, and after much wandering had fallen in with Roaring Abel with his gun over his shoulder. Dr. Stalling had contrived to ask his question in about the most idiotic manner possible. He said, "Can you tell me where I'm going?" "How the devil should I know where you're going, Gosling?" retorted Abel contemptuously. Dr. Stalling was so enraged that he could not speak for a moment or two, and in that moment Abel had disappeared in the woods. Dr. Stalling had eventually found his way home, but he had never hankered to encounter Abel Gay again. Nevertheless, he came now to do his duty. Valancy greeted him with a sinking heart. She had to own to herself that she was terribly afraid of Dr. Stalling still. She had a miserable conviction that if he shook his long, bony finger at her and told her to go home, she dared not disobey. "Mr. Gay," said Dr. Stalling politely and condescendingly, "may I see Miss Sterling alone for a few minutes?" Roaring Abel was a little drunk, just drunk enough to be excessively polite and very cunning. He had been on the point of going away when Dr. Stalling arrived, but now he sat down in a corner of the parlor and folded his arms. "No, no, mister," he said solemnly. "That wouldn't do. Wouldn't do at all. I've got the reputation of my household to keep up. I've got to chaperone this young lady. Can't have any sparkin' going on here behind my back." Outraged Dr. Stalling looked so terrible that Valancy wondered how Abel could endure his aspect. But Abel was not worried at all. "Do you know anything about it anyway?" he asked genially. "About what?" "Sparking," said Abel coolly. Poor Dr. Stalling, who had never married because he believed in a celibate clergy, would not notice this ribald remark. He turned his back on Abel and addressed himself to Valancy. Miss Sterling, I am here in response to your mother's wishes. She begged me to come. I am charged with some messages from her. Will you, he wagged his forefinger, will you hear them? Yes, said Valancy faintly, eyeing the forefinger. It had a hypnotic effect on her. The first is this. If you will leave this house, interjected roaring Abel. House. Troubled with an impediment in your speech, ain't you, mister? This place and return to your home. Mr. James Sterling will himself pay for a good nurse to come here and wait on Miss Gay. Back of her terror, Valancy smiled in secret. Uncle James must indeed regard the matter as desperate when he would loosen his purse strings like that. At any rate, her clan no longer despised her or ignored her. She had become important to them. That's my business, mister, said Abel. Miss Sterling can go if she pleases, or stay if she pleases. I made a fair bargain with her, and she's free to conclude it when she likes. She gives me meals that stick to my ribs. She don't forget to put salt in the porridge. She never slams doors, and when she has nothing to say, she don't talk. That's uncanny in a woman, you know, mister. I'm satisfied. If she isn't, she's free to go. But no woman comes here in Jim Sterling's pay. If anyone does, Abel's voice was uncannily bland and polite. I'll spatter the road with her brains. Tell him that with A. Gay's compliments. Dr. Stalling, a nurse is not what Sissy needs, said Valancy earnestly. She isn't so ill as that yet. What she wants is companionship, somebody she knows and likes just to live with her. You can understand that, I'm sure. I understand that your motive is quite, commendable. Dr. Stalling felt that he was very broad-minded indeed, especially as in his secret soul he did not believe Valancy's motive was commendable. He hadn't the least idea what she was up to, but he was sure her motive was not commendable. When he could not understand a thing, he straightway condemned it. Simplicity itself. But your first duty is to your mother. She needs you. She implores you to come home. She will forgive everything if you will only come home. That's a pretty little thought, remarked Abel meditatively, as he ground some tobacco up in his hand. Dr. Stalling ignored him. She entreats, but I, Miss Sterling. Dr. Stalling remembered that he was an ambassador of Jehovah. I command. As your pastor and spiritual guide, I command you to come home with me, this very day. Get your hat and coat and come now. Dr. Stalling shook his finger at Valancy. Before that pitiless finger, she drooped and wilted visibly. She's giving in, thought roaring Abel. She'll go with him. Beats all, the power these preacher fellows have over women. Valancy was on the point of obeying Dr. Stalling. She must go home with him and give up. She would lapse back to Doss Sterling again, and for her few remaining days or weeks be the cowed, futile creature she had always been. It was her fate, typified by that relentless, uplifted forefinger. She could no more escape from it than roaring Abel from his predestination. She eyed it as the fascinated bird eyes the snake. Another moment. Fear is the original sin, suddenly said a still, small voice away back of Valancy's consciousness. Almost all the evil in the world has its origin in the fact that someone is afraid of something. Valancy stood up. She was still in the clutches of fear, but her soul was her own again. She would not be false to that inner voice. Dr. Stalling, she said slowly, I do not at present owe any duty to my mother. She is quite well.
She has all the assistance and companionship she requires. She does not need me at all. I am needed here. I am going to stay here." "There's spunk for you," said Roaring Abel admiringly. Dr. Stalling dropped his forefinger. One could not keep on shaking a finger forever. "Miss Sterling, is there nothing that can influence you? Do you remember your childhood days?" "Perfectly, and hate them." "Do you realize what people will say? What they are saying?"
"I can imagine it," said Valancy, with a shrug of her shoulders. She was suddenly free of fear again. "I haven't listened to the gossip of Deerwood tea parties and sewing circles 20 years for nothing. But, Dr. Stalling, it doesn't matter in the least to me what they say. Not in the least." Dr. Stalling went away then, a girl who cared nothing for public opinion, over whom sacred family ties had no restraining influence, who hated her childhood memories. Then Cousin Georgiana came, on her own initiative, for nobody would have thought it worthwhile to send her. She found Valancy alone, weeding the little vegetable garden she had planted, and she made all the platitudinous pleas she could think of. Valancy heard her patiently. Cousin Georgiana wasn't such a bad old soul. Then she said, "And now that you have got all that out of your system, Cousin Georgiana, can you tell me how to make creamed codfish so that it will not be as thick as porridge and as salt as the Dead Sea?" "We'll just have to wait," said Uncle Benjamin. "After all, Sissy Gay can't live long. Dr. Marsh tells me she may drop off any day." Mrs. Frederick wept. It would really have been so much easier to bear if Valancy had died. She could have worn mourning then. Chapter 20. When Abel Gay paid Valancy her first month's wages, which he did promptly, in bills reeking with the odor of tobacco and whiskey, Valancy went into Deerwood and spent every cent of it. She got a pretty green crepe dress with a girdle of crimson beads at a bargain sale, a pair of silk stockings to match, and a little crinkled green hat with a crimson rose in it. She even bought a foolish little beribboned and belaced nightgown. She passed the house on Elm Street twice. Valancy never even thought about it as home, but saw no one. No doubt her mother was sitting in the room this lovely June evening, playing solitaire and cheating. Valancy knew that Mrs. Frederick always cheated. She never lost a game. Most of the people Valancy met looked at her seriously and passed her with a cool nod. Nobody stopped to speak to her. Valancy put on her green dress when she got home. Then she took it off again. She felt so miserably undressed in its low neck and short sleeves, and that low crimson girdle around the hips seemed positively indecent. She hung it up in the closet, feeling flatly that she had wasted her money. She would never have the courage to wear that dress. John Foster's arraignment of fear had no power to stiffen her against this. In this one thing, habit and custom were still all-powerful. Yet she sighed as she went down to meet Barney Snaith in her old snuff-brown silk. That green thing had been very becoming. She had seen so much in her one ashamed glance. Above it, her eyes had looked like odd brown jewels, and the girdle had given her flat figure an entirely different appearance. She wished she could have left it on.
But there were some things John Foster did not know. Every Sunday evening, Valancy went to the little Free Methodist church in a valley on the edge of Up Back, a spireless little gray building among the pines, with a few sunken graves and mossy gravestones in the small, paling-encircled, grass-grown square beside it. She liked the minister who preached there. He was so simple and sincere. An old man who lived in Port Lawrence and came out by the lake in a little disappearing propeller boat to give a free service to the people of the small, stony farms back of the hills, who would otherwise never have heard any gospel message. She liked the simple service and the fervent singing. She liked to sit by the open window and look out into the pine woods. The congregation was always small. The Free Methodists were few in number, poor, and generally illiterate. But Valancy loved those Sunday evenings. For the first time in her life, she liked going to church. The rumor reached Deerwood that she had turned Free Methodist and sent Mrs. Frederick to bed for a day. But Valancy had not turned anything. She went to the church because she liked it, and because in some inexplicable way it did her good. Old Mr. Towers believed exactly what he preached, and somehow it made a tremendous difference. Oddly enough, Roaring Abel disapproved of her going to the Hill Church as strongly as Mrs. Frederick herself could have done. He had no use for Free Methodists. He was a Presbyterian. But Valancy went in spite of him. "We'll hear something worse than that about her soon," Uncle Benjamin predicted gloomily. They did. Valancy could not quite explain, even to herself, just why she wanted to go to that party. It was a dance up back at Chidley Corners, and dances at Chidley Corners were not, as a rule, the sort of assemblies where well-brought-up young ladies were found. Valancy knew it was coming off, for Roaring Abel had been engaged as one of the fiddlers. But the idea of going had never occurred to her until Roaring Abel himself broached it at supper. "You come with me to the dance," he ordered. "It'll do you good. Put some color in your face. You look peaked. You want something to liven you up." Valancy found herself suddenly wanting to go. She knew nothing at all of what dances at Chidley Corners were apt to be like. Her idea of dances had been fashioned on the correct affairs that went by that name in Deerwood and Port Lawrence. Of course, she knew the Corners dance wouldn't be just like them. Much more informal, of course, but so much the more interesting. Why shouldn't she go? Sissy was in a week of apparent health and improvement. She wouldn't mind staying alone in the least. She entreated Valancy to go if she wanted to. And Valancy did want to go. She went to her room to dress. A rage against the snuff-brown silk seized her. Wear that to a party? Never. She pulled her green crepe from its hanger and put it on feverishly. It was nonsense to feel so naked just because her neck and arms were bare. That was just her old maidishness. She would not be ridden by it. On went the dress, the slippers. It was the first time she had worn a pretty dress since the organdies of her early teens. And they had never made her look like this.
If she only had a necklace or something, she wouldn't feel so bare then. She ran down to the garden. There were clovers there, great crimson things growing in the long grass. Valancy gathered handfuls of them and strung them on a cord. Fastened above her neck, they gave her the comfortable sensation of a collar and were oddly becoming. Another circlet of them went round her hair, dressed in the low puffs that became her. Excitement brought those faint pink stains to her face. She flung on her coat and pulled the little twisty hat over her hair. "You look so nice and different, dear," said Sissy. "Like a green moonbeam with a gleam of red in it, if there could be such a thing." Valancy stooped to kiss her. "I don't feel right about leaving you alone, Sissy." "Oh, I'll be all right. I feel better tonight than I have for a long while. I've been feeling badly to see you sticking here so closely on my account. I hope you'll have a nice time. I never was at a party at the Corners, but I used to go sometimes, long ago, to dances up back. We always had good times, and you needn't be afraid of Father being drunk tonight. He never drinks when he engages to play for a party. But there may be liquor. What will you do if it gets rough?" "Nobody would molest me." "Not seriously, I suppose. Father would see to that. But it might be noisy and unpleasant." "I won't mind. I'm only going as a looker-on. I don't expect to dance. I just want to see what a party up back is like. I've never seen anything except decorous deerwood." Sissy smiled rather dubiously. She knew much better than Valancy what a party up back might be like, if there should be liquor. But again, there mightn't be. "I hope you'll enjoy it, dear," she repeated. Valancy enjoyed the drive there. They went early, for it was 12 miles to Chidley Corners, and they had to go in Abel's old, ragged top buggy. The road was rough and rocky, like most Muskoka roads, but full of the austere charm of northern woods. It wound through beautiful, purring pines that were ranks of enchantment in the June sunset, and over the curious jade-green rivers of Muskoka, fringed by aspens that were always quivering with some supernal joy. Roaring Abel was excellent company, too. He knew all the stories and legends of the wild, beautiful up back, and he told them to Valancy as they drove along. Valancy had several fits of inward laughter over what Uncle Benjamin and Aunt Wellington, et al., would feel and think and say if they saw her driving with Roaring Abel in that terrible buggy to a dance at Chidley Corners. At first, the dance was quiet enough, and Valancy was amused and entertained. She even danced twice herself, with a couple of nice, up-back boys who danced beautifully and told her she did too. Another compliment came her way, not a very subtle one perhaps, but Valancy had had too few compliments in her life to be over-nice on that point. She overheard two of the up-back young men talking about her in the dark lean-to behind her. "Know who that girl in green is?" "Nope. Guess she's from out front. The port, maybe. Got a stylish look to her." "No beaut but cute-looking, I'll say. J'ever see such eyes?" The big room was decorated with pine and fir boughs and lighted by Chinese lanterns. The floor was waxed, and Roaring Abel's fiddle, purring under his skilled touch, worked magic. The up-back girls were pretty and prettily dressed. Valancy thought it the nicest party she had ever attended.
By 11 o'clock, she had changed her mind. A new crowd had arrived, a crowd unmistakably drunk. Whiskey began to circulate freely. Very soon, almost all the men were partly drunk. Those in the porch and outside around the door began howling, "Come all ye's," and continued to howl them. The room grew noisy and reeking. Quarrels started up here and there. Bad language and obscene songs were heard. The girls, swung rudely in the dances, became disheveled and tawdry. Valancy, alone in her corner, was feeling disgusted and repentant. Why had she ever come to such a place? Freedom and independence were all very well, but one should not be a little fool. She'd known what it would be like. She might have taken warning from Sissy's guarded sentences. Her head was aching. She was sick of the whole thing. But what could she do? She must stay to the end. Abel could not leave till then, and that would probably be not till 3 or 4 in the morning. The new influx of boys had left the girls far in the minority, and partners were scarce. Valancy was pestered with invitations to dance. She refused them all shortly, and some of her refusals were not well taken. There were muttered oaths and sullen looks. Across the room, she saw a group of the strangers talking together and glancing meaningly at her. What were they plotting? It was at this moment that she saw Barney Snaith looking in over the heads of the crowd at the doorway. Valancy had 2 distinct convictions. One was that she was quite safe now. The other was that this was why she had wanted to come to the dance. It had been such an absurd hope that she had not recognized it before. But now she knew she had come because of the possibility that Barney might be there too. She thought that perhaps she ought to be ashamed for this, but she wasn't. After her feeling of relief, her next feeling was one of annoyance with Barney for coming there unshaved. Surely he might have enough self-respect to groom himself up decently when he went to a party. There he was, bare-headed, bristly-chinned, in his old trousers and his blue homespun shirt. Not even a coat. Valancy could have shaken him in her anger. No wonder people believed everything bad of him. But she was not afraid any longer. One of the whispering group left his comrades and came across the room to her, through the whirling couples that now filled it uncomfortably. He was a tall, broad-shouldered fellow, not ill-dressed or ill-looking, but unmistakably half-drunk. He asked Valancy to dance. Valancy declined civilly. His face turned livid. He threw his arm about her and pulled her to him. His hot, whiskied breath burned her face. "We won't have fine lady airs here, my girl. If you ain't too good to come here, you ain't too good to dance with us. Me and my pals have been watching you. You've got to give us each a turn and a kiss to boot." Valancy tried desperately and vainly to free herself. She was being dragged out into the maze of shouting, stamping, yelling dancers. The next moment, the man who held her went staggering across the room from a neatly planted blow on the jaw, knocking down whirling couples as he went. Valancy felt her arm grasped. "This way, quick," said Barney Snaith. He swung her out through the open window behind them, vaulted lightly over the sill and caught her hand. "Quick, we must run for it. They'll be after us." Valancy ran as she had never run before, clinging tight to Barney's hand, wondering why she did not drop dead in such a mad scamper. Suppose she did? What a scandal it would make for her poor people. For the first time, Valancy felt a little sorry for them. Also, she felt glad that she had escaped from that horrible row. Also glad that she was holding tight to Barney's hand. Her feelings were badly mixed, and she had never had so many in such a brief time in her life. They finally reached a quiet corner in the pine woods. The pursuit had taken a different direction, and the whoops and yells behind them were growing faint. Valancy, out of breath, with a crazily beating heart, collapsed on the trunk of a fallen pine. "Thanks," she gasped. "What a goose you were to come to such a place," said Barney. "I didn't know it would be like this," protested Valancy. "You should have known. Chidley Corners." "It was just a name to me." Valancy knew Barney could not realize how ignorant she was of the regions up back. She had lived in Deerwood all her life, and of course he supposed she knew. He didn't know how she had been brought up. There was no use trying to explain. "When I drifted in at Abel's this evening, and Sissy told me you'd come here, I was amazed and downright scared. Sissy told me she was worried about you, but hadn't liked to say anything to dissuade you for fear you'd think she was thinking selfishly about herself. So I came on up here instead of going to Deerwood." Valancy felt a sudden delightful glow irradiating soul and body under the dark pines. So he had actually come up to look after her. "As soon as they stop hunting for us, we'll sneak around to the Muskoka Road. I left Lady Jane down there. I'll take you home. I suppose you've had enough of your party." "Quite," said Valancy meekly. The first half of the way home, neither of them said anything. It would not have been much use. Lady Jane made so much noise they could not have heard each other. Anyway, Valancy did not feel conversationally inclined. She was ashamed of the whole affair, ashamed of her folly in going, ashamed of being found in such a place by Barney Snaith. By Barney Snaith, reputed jailbreaker, infidel, forger, and defaulter. Valancy's lips twitched in the darkness as she thought of it. But she was ashamed. And yet she was enjoying herself, was full of a strange exultation, bumping over that rough road beside Barney Snaith. The big trees shot by them. The tall mulleins stood up along the road in stiff, orderly ranks, like companies of soldiers. The thistles looked like drunken fairies or tipsy elves as their car lights passed over them. This was the first time she had even been in a car. After all, she liked it. She was not in the least afraid with Barney at the wheel. Her spirits rose rapidly as they tore along. She ceased to feel ashamed. She ceased to feel anything except that she was part of a comet rushing gloriously through the night of space. All at once, just where the pine woods frayed out to the scrub barrens, Lady Jane became quiet, too quiet. Lady Jane slowed down quietly and stopped. Barney uttered an aghast exclamation, got out, investigated, came apologetically back. I'm a doddering idiot, out of gas. I knew I was short when I left home, but I meant to fill up in Deerwood. Then I forgot all about it in my hurry to get to the corners. What can we do? Asked Valancy coolly. I don't know. There's no gas nearer than Deerwood, 9 miles away, and I don't dare leave you here alone. There are always tramps on this road, and some of those crazy fools back at the corners may come straggling along presently. There were boys there from the port. As far as I can see, the best thing to do is for us just to sit patiently here until some car comes along and lends us enough gas to get to Roaring Abel's with. Well, what's the matter with that? Said Valancy. We may have to sit here all night, said Barney. I don't mind, said Valancy. Barney gave a short laugh. If you don't, I needn't. I haven't any reputation to lose. Nor I, said Valancy comfortably. This is the end of chapters 15 through 20 of the Blue Castle Whispering Pages audiobook. You can find the next chapters right here on the Blue Castle Project YouTube channel. Thank you for subscribing, giving a thumbs up, commenting, and sharing.